Hello and welcome to YHTV's Magical Medical Tour. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Christina Suzuma, and our topic today is Inside the Doctor's Bag with our wonderful medical guide, Dr. Glenn Woolman. Hello there. There's that bag, my favorite bag.
There you go. I know you love that. I don't take it out as much anymore except for our shows and occasionally when I go see some private clients at their houses on house calls.
That is so cool. That's like those traditional medical bags. I love that.
Yeah, it's quite fun. Greetings, everybody. Welcome to Magical Medical Tour. I'm Dr. Glenn Woolman. I will be your medical guide today along with Christina as we search another quadrant of the healthcare galaxy, this one inside the doctor's bag. I'm going to talk about a number of topics today, so welcome.
Now, at any time during this show, you can feel free to ask a question or make a comment simply by scrolling down on your screen and typing it into the comment box. Now, you could listen to this a year later, 2 years later. You can still make a comment and we'll make sure that it gets to Dr. Woolman, and we will reply to it. Now, if you're listening to us on a device as a podcast, just pick up the phone and give us a call at 818-LETS-TALK, 818-LETS-TALK. There you go, Doc.
Well, all right.
Where are we going today?
So first, I want to recognize something that's happening in the world today. There's a lot of chaos going on and a lot of tragedy and issues. Certainly, we're all aware of what's going on in France and other parts of Europe right now. Many people lost their lives. Many people are fighting for their lives. Police, military, citizens, the government all came to do their part in the process, people opening their houses to strangers to get them out of the way of harm. But one of the things I wanted to mention, because it's Magical Medical Tour, is I want to send kudos to the medical community in Paris. When things happened, immediately all of these people, nurses, doctors, techs, all sorts of hospital people, went immediately to hospitals knowing that their services were going to be needed. So without question, they just took off and went to the hospitals getting ready to take care of all of these people. So I want to send great kudos out to them and certainly blessings out to all of the people in difficult times right now. And for something different, I want to send compassion to the people that caused this episode. Hopefully, at some point in time, we could all come together and find meaning from a humanitarian point of view to live together in peace and happiness the way I believe it should be.
Lovely. Thank you.
Any thoughts from you?
It's been a very moving time. I mean, for the past now it's explosive because as some people are saying, being in France, it feels so close to home. That's what I had heard some people say, over the radio broadcast and everything. Whereas, when it was in the Middle East and the havoc was growing over there in Syria and Turkey, people, it was still at a distance. But now it's like, wow, it's really close now. So everyone's become really aware. And I agree with you about the compassion and sending out the blessings, Glenn, because I feel it's not just affected those people and their families, but it's created a lot of fear in the world right now. And we do funny things when we become very fear-based. So I believe that, we have to send out the blessings in many, many forms and in many levels for people who are angry right now and who have created a lot of fear, because that's when things start to escalate.
Right.
And, to send the blessings. And like you said, to that, we will find balance. We will find balance of peace and harmony. And now that we're all connected with social media, hopefully it will reach more people.
Right. All right. Let's push on. And speaking of pushing on, last episode, we spoke with and interviewed Pushan Chowdhury. And we talked about pediatrics, and one of the major topics we spoke about was childhood obesity. And this is very important to me on many levels. So I want to continue a little bit of the discussion about childhood obesity. One of the things we talked about was the bariatric surgery. Remember that?
Oh, yes.
And we didn't really get into that. And right after we did that episode, an article came out from the New England Journal of Medicine, which is one of the prestigious articles in medicine. Probably most people even know about it, other than just people in the medical profession. But it was an article on bariatric surgeries for obesity in childhood. And the concept being that we have over 4 million children in the United States that have experienced obesity. And there are concerns about health problems at the time and in the future. And so bariatric surgery, we talked about, was one of the last choices. First, we wanted to look at lifestyles and diets and a number of other things, but bariatric surgery is becoming more and more popular. So
amongst children.
Amongst adolescents, we're talking about people from, say, 8 years up. But this study, and actually we're seeing obesity even in 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds now. Yes. So this particular study that came out studied the effects of bariatric surgery over a 3-year period. And the kids ranged from about 13, 14 up to about 19. And just to give you an idea, in 2003, there were approximately 800 cases of bariatric surgeries, and in 2009 it went up to 1,600, so it doubled. So these were things that we're looking at, things like weight loss, coexisting conditions, weight-related quality of life, micronutrients. We'll talk about all of these things in a few minutes, and the need for more abdominal surgical procedures. And so what happened was the study went from 2007 in March to 2012 in February. And they took 242 kids. They did the surgeries, and then they followed them up at 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, and 3 years. And they did a number of testing, a lot of blood testing and imaging testing. And then there were questionnaires that they would fill out. For instance, on a scale of 0 to 100, before they started the test, before they did the surgery, how did you feel your quality of life was? And the higher it went, the better they felt their lives were. So this was the test that they did at the New England Journal, and it was done at a number of different centers. So there are 6 different hospitals that they collected the data from. And out of the 242 kids, there were 3 different types of surgeries. And this is what I wanted to bring up a little bit more, the bariatric surgeries that they offer now. The first one is called the Roux-en-Y gastric bypass. And this is spelled ROUX-EN- and then the letter Y, Roux-en-Y bypass. There's a nice YouTube video on this for people that want to see it. But basically, it's all of these different procedures are designed to make the stomach smaller. So one of the reasons we have a stomach is so that it deposits and stores the food that we eat until the body can start digesting it. So the concept being that the smaller the storage area, the quicker the child will get hungry, quicker the child will get full more quickly, and then they won't eat as much, less calories, and that combined with a number of other things will make it so that they will lose weight. So that's the first one, the Roux-en-Y gastric bypass. Another one is called the sleeve gastrectomy. And this is where they essentially narrow the entire stomach. And they take away and remove a lot of the stomach so that you have, instead of a bigger mass or a bigger volume, you have something that might be the size of, say, a banana. So they narrow it down and they make it less for storage. And again, the same possibilities, because the area is smaller, you get full faster, less calories, and hopefully you lose weight. And then the third one is the adjustable gastric banding. And in this one, they actually just they don't cut away any of the stomach and they don't reconnect parts of the intestine. Nothing like that is done. They just put a band around the upper portion of the stomach, the actual stomach organ. When I say stomach, I don't mean the abdominal area. I'm talking about the organ, the stomach. They put a band around maybe the top third of it, and then they have the ability through a port under the skin with a hypodermic needle, they could put in more air or less air so they can tighten the band or loosen the band. And by tightening it, again, it serves the purpose of stopping the amount of food that goes in. People get more hungry, less hungry.
Wow.
So those are the three different procedures, all of them. And so it was broken up. There were a number of kids that had one, there were another number that had the other, and a third that had the third. And they looked at these over time, over the, as I said, 6 months, year, 2 years, and 3 years. And they looked at a number of things, baseline before they went in. And I thought this was somewhat interesting. The mean or average BMI, the body mass index, which, if you're not familiar with that, it's a way of gauging the relationship between the weight of someone and their height. And normally for an adult, a good range is somewhere between 18 and 25. It varies a little bit more for children. But just to give you that as a concept, someone who's in the BMI range as an adult of 18 to 25 is of normal weight. So if you're above 25 to 29 or so, you're getting overweight. When you're above 30 and going higher, then you're getting into obesity. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay, so the average BMI of these 242 kids was 53. And some of them had a high up to 88. It was, pretty intense, some of these kids. So at the end of the study, the things that showed was that many of the problems that the kids had, like high blood pressure, kidney problems, depression, micronutrient issues occasionally, and dyslipidemias. And when I say dyslipidemias, I'm talking about lipids like cholesterol, triglycerides. Everybody knows about LDL and HDL, the high density lipoproteins and the low density lipoproteins. We all have those buzzwords now. So all of these things were looked at, including diabetes and a number of other programs. So over this period of time, when they looked at it, there were a number of things that happened. The kids, at the end of the 3-year period, many of them lost up to 40 kilograms, which would be about 90 pounds.
Over 3 years.
Yeah, over 3 years, and they were able to maintain it. That was the important part.
Yes.
Yeah. They also. Go ahead.
This is after. So they did the surgery, and this is after 3 years.
Well, they looked at the study, they did the surgery, they looked at all the kids, they did studies on them, they got their weight, their height, they measured blood levels of certain things, et cetera. Mm-hmm. And then they did the surgery, one of the 3 types of surgeries. And over the next 6 months, 1 year, 2 year, and 3 year, they would come in and they would visually test them, they would do blood tests on them, they would do a number of other things. And at the end of the 3-year period, they had pretty good results. A lot of kids, many of the kids, and you could look in the New England Journal of Medicine for this. I don't want to start giving lots of numbers because then people's minds go off listening to percentages and things like that. But there was significant improvement in weight reduction. There was also significant improvement in the lipid problems. There was significant improvement in kidney problems and blood pressure. Blood pressures came down to normal in many of these. And again, these were done without other medications. So, you talk about the statins right now. Everybody's thinking about taking statins to lower your cholesterol. They didn't do any of these. They didn't give the kids statins also. It was strictly the surgery and trying to change the lifestyle a little bit. And they saw good results in many of these cases. Now, many of the pre-diabetics or the type 2 diabetics actually went back to normal. The type 1 diabetics, which we've discussed on many of our shows, the ones where you actually need the insulin, it's more genetically oriented rather than lifestyle oriented, they didn't change. I think there was one death in the study. But some of the other problems that came up where they saw micronutritional depletions, and I talked about this with Pushan. One of the concerns I had was that kids would not absorb their vitamins and things like that. So we saw that there was low iron and ferritin levels, and ferritin is related to iron, and iron is related to hemoglobin, and hemoglobin is related to oxygen, so it's very important. Also, vitamin B12, vitamin A, vitamin D, all of the things that we talk about, and we're all taking our supplements all the time, a lot of those had drops in their levels. So this was an important factor that we needed to relate to as we go into the future. So it's not just simply have the surgery, lose the weight, and you're going to be better.
I see. So what they tracked was these micronutrients. They weren't being held in the body after the surgeries.
Right. In fact, they weren't. The problem was they either weren't being created or they weren't being absorbed through foods, not enough, because in certain cases, the absorption ability that happens in the stomach and the small intestine, as we've spoken of on many occasions, didn't happen as appropriately. So this is something that's very important for us to look at. And then some of the kids needed intra-abdominal surgeries. Some of them had other procedures that happened after they had the surgeries. So as we move forward, an interesting set of words came up for me. You know how we talk about dog years? You know, we kid around and say, in terms of dog years, I think we've always used 7 years of a dog's life as one of ours or something like that. Well, the medical community is now talking about something called pound years. And what they're saying is that kids that have too many pounds at an early age will have problems as they go into adulthood. And this is going to be another part of the discussion we're going to have in just a few minutes. So the hypothesis is that doing lifestyle changes, they found that it didn't help as much, especially with the severely obese. They needed something else. The ones that were severely obese were not able to lose all the weight and improve as well. They needed the bariatric surgery. But we need to, as we move forward, we need to look at ways to improve that surgery and to improve the problems with the loss of micronutrients, et cetera, et cetera. But at least it does give some hope that there are some things that could be done. Now, of course, you know, the reason that we're talking about this, and you and I talk about on our show all the time, is prevention. The best treatment for all of this is to not have obesity happen. And so that starts with lifestyle at an early age.
Yes.
So we talk about that. And so I just wanted to talk about the bariatric surgery, which we didn't talk about too much before. And again, the idea of the parents becoming motivated more and more to not have their children become obese. So even though these ideas that these other surgical procedures are out there, it doesn't mean they're superb and there could be better ways of doing it.
So Glenn, did they also show in this study the families? And did these children come from obese families?
They looked at a number of things in the study. They looked at, and there was nothing really specific. There were various economic groups, various obesities in the family. It varied. There were many variations on that, but certainly if you have obese parents, there's much more of a tendency to consider the probability that the children are going to be obese. But it was a wide variety of people.
Because that always interests me, that you hear the word, oh, it's genetic. It's genetic. So it's passed down. So my grandparents were obese. My parents are obese. Now I'm obese. But I've also seen individuals who've been able to change their lifestyle, that they have worked their way out of that issue as they've, especially in the like later teen years.
Right.
So though, can a situation where it is based on genetics, that it is actually obesity is passed down into the generations?
Genetics are certainly a part of it, and we've talked about genes, the leptins and the ghrelins, I believe is the word. There are ghrelin.
Ghrelins?
I may be pronouncing that incorrectly, but there are enzymes and there are products in the body that cause appetite suppression, let the body know, we're a biofeedback mechanism, the body is. So when you get hungry, you eat. So there are certain chemicals and proteins and enzymes that relate to digestion and to eating and appetite suppression. So some people don't have any of these, so they're continuously hungry all the time. They never know when they're full. Some people never get hungry. So there's certainly an aspect of that. But even that aspect, we know in many cases that genetics sometimes are hardwired, and it's sometimes it's the software where there are actually switches. So you have capabilities of turning on and turning off certain genes with certain lifestyle changes. Just because, and we've talked about this with heart problems, and this will lead me into my next topic. Some people that have genetics for heart disease, if they change lifestyles, they decrease the probability of having the heart disease. Doesn't necessarily mean it goes away totally. Right. But there are many complicating factors to this. It's not just simply calories. It definitely is not just stop eating. It's not that. It's also, we look at now, eating is certainly part of it. The types of foods we're eating, the lack of physical exercise. You mentioned this last week where they're cutting out physical education. The people are not walking on their streets anymore, walking to the park, doing these things. A lot of kids and adults are spending a lot of screen time, so to speak.
Right.
And these are different aspects. So all of these things come into play in terms of childhood obesity, which could become the main concern we have before was that if you're obese as a child and you go into adulthood with the same obesity, many of these things, kidney problems, depression, high blood pressure, cardiovascular disease, metabolic diseases like diabetes, lipid diseases, heart attacks, strokes, all of these things are going to be increased in use. So we're trying to motivate families to prevent these things rather than allow them to happen knowing, oh, we don't have to worry about it. There's always bariatric surgery. Right.
But that's not as quick as a pill, though.
Right, or a pill. So another study that came out, and I truly believe, not that I'm biased, that because Magical Medical Tour talked about childhood obesity, all of these studies then came out afterwards. I'm sure we motivated the American Heart Association to do a study. So just recently in 2015, the American Heart Association, which is the group that's responsible, when you learn CPR and all of these other things that we do in communities, that comes from the American Heart Association. It's a big group of physicians and others in this country that are focused on the heart. A lot of cardiologists, internal medicine, they're in the American Heart Association. And they just did a scientific session recently, and they were talking about obese kids. And they were going down to ages down to at least 8. And what they were seeing was that they were potentially showing signs of heart disease at age 8.
Wow.
And the way they did it, there were about 40 kids. Now, in the first study that we talked about with the bariatrics, they didn't have a control group. So there were issues with this. It was strictly people that had the bariatric surgery. That was one type of a test. But in this study, They took 20 kids that were normal, and they took 20 kids that were obese. And what they did was they put them in an MRI scanner, and they looked at their hearts and their heart function. And they saw that in a number of the children that were obese, they were seeing evidence at an early age of heart disease, thickening of the wall of the heart, the left ventricle. And they were seeing difficulty in function. Now, here's one of the scary parts of this, is that none of the kids had any symptoms. So no kid was complaining of chest pain, no kid was complaining of shortness of breath or weakness or anything like that, which is very scary, which means you think, well, just because my kid is overweight doesn't mean he has heart problems. But this is a study that proves that may not be true. They saw the obese children had the high risk for future problems with cardiovascular disease. And at this point in time, we talk about the future. So an 8-year-old might not have something till they're 40, right? But this
the signs
appears,
are there.
but it's yes, the signs are there, and it may be changing, because we may see in the future that kids now at 16, 18, 20 are now having heart disease, just like we're seeing kids now that are having diabetes at an early age that's not related to the genetic type 1. So, and this study in itself is an important warning to parents. And the problem with this study was that the really high-risk kids that had either severe diabetes or were so morbidly obese that they couldn't fit into the scanner, they were left out. So that means that there's even more of a possibility that by being obese, you have the opportunity to develop early heart disease. And this is what we're trying to fight against. So I think that us here on Magical Medical Tour, the scientific community, the medical community, everyone we know, nutritionists, dietitians, everyone, trying to promote a process now that has to do with being careful about what you eat and changing activities and doing more in terms of weight control, exercise, etc. Because it's not just about being or looking fat. It's about kidneys, blood pressure, heart, nutrients, everything else. It's pretty intense.
Oh, it is. Wow.
Yeah. And so, again, I want to, give kudos to Michelle Obama and her cause for childhood obesity, to eliminate it, et cetera, et cetera. Any thoughts on that?
Wow. How do we educate the parents?
Well, I think
it always comes back to that, Glenn, it's like, I mean, you can educate the children to a certain point. And as you were talking, I was imagining you going into schools to talk about, just to have a great, fun conversation with the young kids. You know how I could remember when my son would come home and go, I have to push in my chair because someone could trip. All these things that they've learned and they've been influenced to go, no, I don't want to eat that, or I don't want to drink this. And I think you can do it to a certain amount with the children. But they still go home, and what's on their plate and what's in their household and in their cupboards. When I have parents go, oh, yeah, my child only likes potato chips and soda. And I look at them and go, so why do you keep buying it? Oh, because they like to eat it and they won't eat anything else. And I kind of go, it's like, well, don't give them a choice.
Yeah. And there's also other parts too. It isn't just the kid and the parents. It's the community. It's the people that are producing our foods and putting things in our foods that are not necessarily helpful for us.
Yes, absolutely.
So we all need to be part of that. One of the things that is important, though, is the long-term ramifications, and that's what we need to be thinking about.
Yes. So now it's 2015. So it's 3 years after the last statistics.
That was for the bariatric surgery.
Right.
Some other things that came up were that just lifestyle changes alone, where they took some kids and tried to do lifestyle changes with them, that didn't last, especially with the morbidly obese. So after 2 years, they were gaining weight again and doing a lot of things that were not correct.
Right. But I think the lifestyle changes, if you're going to take the child out, you need to take the whole family.
You need to take the whole family.
Right.
These are serious issues, and the whole family needs to be part of it. We always talk about that. They learn it from the top, and you can set examples for your kids in many cases. But sometimes, as Pushan talked about the other day, there are some parents that are working very hard, and they try and make a meal for their kids. They don't, but they're not at home because they're working, and the kids are picking out what they want to eat. So it becomes a little more difficult all the time. But I think setting up the right milieu in honor of our French listeners, that's important. But there's so many parts to this thing, and it's when we talk about it becoming an epidemic, a non-communicable epidemic. So you can't catch this like you could catch measles. But it's still an epidemic, and it's causing problems for our future. And it does have cost-related issues for our whole society. If we're spending lots of money on treating 19-year-olds having heart attacks,
absolutely,
et cetera, very sad. Children should have the opportunity to live a long, healthy life. But so much for that.
Oh my! So hopefully in the next year, in 2016, that they'll have some numbers out so that we can see if anything's balanced out since 3 years ago, since those last statistics. Because I do believe, just looking back at some of my notes here, that the number of obese children you were saying is 4 million. Now, do you know when that statistic was given?
That was given at the time of the study.
Okay, so that was back in 2007.
Right. And it's getting bigger.
It is getting bigger.
And we talked about not just that, and that was in the United States alone. Yes. Last time when we were speaking with Pushan, we were also talking about the world.
Yes.
So it's big numbers everywhere.
Yes, there is. I mean, I know my friends from Asia. They were very clear about that. They said that the Japanese were so slight at one time, but now because of all the fast food, they are also starting to become a little overweight.
Yeah,
I know. So sad. What are we doing?
We're eating ourselves into oblivion.
Oh my gosh. Well, hopefully it starts to change, because it's just so, I don't know how people can feel good.
Well, one of the things that it showed in one of the studies is that some of these kids have depression.
Oh, of course. How can you not?
So they're not feeling good.
Yes. And I mean, as I said, as they remove the physical part in anyone's life, not just children. I mean, even the elderly, even any of us, you remove our physical walking and movement of exertion, right?
Right.
Which is good for us. They become lethargic, and I mean, I have parents say, "Oh yeah, my child reads all day. They don't want to go out and walk or play sports." And I'm looking at them going, you know how unhealthy that is? How is that child's tendons and muscles and bones developing? It's very sad. I think somewhere we're missing out on the education of educating, the people, for example, the adults.
Not on Magical Medical Tour.
Not on Magical Medical Tour, but I think it needs to be broader than that. And I know I've seen different hospital, like Kaiser, and different hospital groups, and they're constantly publishing magazines and books about eating healthy, being healthy, and exercising, but the communities just aren't listening.
Well, I talk about this all the time, where it's the difference between intellect and consciousness, where intellectually you could talk to any one of these parents and they would know that being obese or being overweight is not healthy. They may know that, but they're not taking it to the level of consciousness, and that's where we need to go. I always talk about how, as a species, we need to be slammed in the face before we make changes. And that just seems to be the way it is. And I think that one of the things that should really be taught, even before reading, writing, and arithmetic, is consciousness, ways to think, ways to discern things. And we're going to be talking about that a little bit more in the show today, in fact.
No, you're absolutely right.
That's what has to change.
Unless we announce there's an alien race coming to eat the people who are obese.
Yeah.
Believe me.
You could say that actually we're just an agricultural planet for another alien race, and they're making us all pate.
Yeah. And the obese ones go first because they're the juiciest, right?
There you go.
I think people lose weight real fast.
Yeah, unless we find out that the really skinny ones are going to be toothpicks.
I still don't know which is worse.
I don't either.
I'll be the toothpick. It's okay right now.
Yeah, or the dental floss. Yeah, there's lots of possibilities like that. That could be another show that we could have. Alien invaders.
Did we wake you up yet?
Right. We're getting hungry. You're going to be seeing us around your planet. When you see solar flares and you start seeing more meteorites, those aren't really meteorites and things. They're just coming here to eat.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
All right, we're going to another area right now.
Another quadrant.
Another quadrant, and this is where I need your fanfare. We've talked about this many times, and I ask you to give a fanfare. We're going to go to Myth Takes. So do you have a fanfare for us?
Yay!
Well, there you go. I like that. So, as you know, in Myth Takes, these are medical myths that have been perpetrated throughout a long period of time that people talk about. And since we're coming into winter, I just turned on my heat for the first time, and I know people in other parts of the country where it's minus 30 below don't understand that when it gets below 75 for me, that's winter. So my question for you, the way I usually bring up a myth, is, Christina, when you go outside into the cold, where do you lose most of your heat? What part of your body?
Let me think about this.
Okay.
Right. Where do we lose most of our heat?
Yeah, I mean, it's the one that everybody says, make sure you cover this because that's where you lose most of your heat.
Isn't that funny? I can't, the being raised, you keep everything bundled, right? But I want to say my hands and my feet.
Hands and feet are definitely part of it. But the myth is that we lose most of our heat from our head.
From our head?
From our head. And where this myth came from. Yeah, exactly. Myths should be laughed at.
Interesting.
Yeah. The studies that came out, the scientific community kind of believes that this came out from studies in the 1950s from the military, where they were doing studies on hypothermia and what should happen. And then in the 1970s, they put out a survival manual saying that about 40 to 50% of the body heat is lost from the head.
Wow, really?
And some people, the myth, when a myth starts, it can go anywhere. So,
but you just said the Medical Society put out a paper on that?
No, the Army did.
Oh, the Army did. Oh, okay.
Military, U.S. Army, a survival manual.
So keep your head, don't keep anywhere else warm. Just keep your head warm.
Keep your head warm because they said between 40 to 50%, but the myths went up to sometimes 80%. But basically, this is totally not true.
That's why it's always wear the hat, wear the toque, keep your head warm.
Definitely keep your head warm, and we'll talk about that for a minute. All parts of the body, every square inch of the body is capable of losing heat. So it just then depends on two other parts. One, a surface area that's exposed, and two, the amount of blood supply to certain specific areas. And there are a couple of areas that the body tries to supply blood more to for thermoregulating purposes. That means when people are too hot, sometimes the blood flow to certain areas will increase and they will start sweating, and that will cool them down. And those areas are the scalp and face, the axillary regions, the armpits, the groin, and the fingers and toes. The extremities, essentially. But the reality is that if you walked outside and your entire body was unclothed, you were completely naked, you would lose heat from all of those areas, depending on the surface area. So in the case of the head, where we're saying we think we lose 40 to 50%, that's not true. The head is about 10% of the body surface area. So you would really lose about 10% of the heat from that area. However, there are areas that you can lose heat faster, and those are the areas around the scalp, the armpits, the groin, and the fingertips, toe tips, and things like that. So the bottom line here is basically keep warm and clothe yourself all over. Definitely wearing a hat is important, and that will help prevent some loss. But part of it is because if it's unexposed, that's where you think you're losing your heat. If you just wore a pair of pants and a hat, you would lose your heat from your torso. Right. So whatever part you covered would be protected. Whatever part you uncovered, that's where you would lose most of the heat from. If you were in a survival situation where you really had nothing and you had to cover certain parts, your armpits, your groin, fingers and toes, and maybe face and head should be covered, but you're still going to lose heat from unexposed areas.
Interesting.
Yeah, I thought it was, especially during this time. And again, it's a myth take. We're breaking a myth.
Okay, keep those fingers and toes covered.
Yeah, and so you just, by putting your hands in your armpits.
Well, that's what a lot of ball players do, don't they?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Now, I don't know what to tell you about your groin.
Well, that's so interesting because, the soccer players I know in Canada, that's what they would do. They'd stick their fingers, under their armpits or else down their shorts.
Right.
And they'll go, these are the two warmest places, of their bodies. So that's what they walk around on the field doing.
Right.
So maybe there's something to that, huh?
Yeah, I think so. You definitely want to keep that warm. But the key here, especially as we go into the winter season, and it's obvious, but stay warm all over. And definitely wear a hat, just because we've busted the myth that most of our heat doesn't get lost from the head. Right. Doesn't mean we don't lose heat from the head, and doesn't mean that we won't be warmer if we cover our head. So
now I have a medical question concerning keeping warm.
Well, all right.
Because I know when I was a child, it was hard to bundle me up because I would get so hot. I would perspire, which is also not good as far as I'm concerned, because, you're all damp and then you start unzipping your jacket and then it gets really cold because your skin is so damp, right?
Right.
And of course I get to school and I'm unzipping everything and taking it off because I'm sweating underneath the jackets. And, I've noticed the children at school are the same thing. The minute the parents walk them to the gate, next thing you know, their jackets are all being thrown off.
Right.
Because mom and dad aren't watching. And I was laughing these last few mornings because it's been very cold here in Los Angeles. It's been under 50 in the morning when we get there. And I see these kids just stripping down.
Right.
I go, are you not cold? And they go, no, we're so hot. I mean, because they're younger. They've got higher metabolism, of course. I mean, is that good for them?
Yes, it's okay. Now, it depends what you're actually asking is good.
Like for them to remove their jackets or whatever because they are too hot and they are starting to sweat.
Yeah, if you're in a protected environment, in other words, if you're still outside, but you see people that runners, for example, joggers will put on a pair of gloves, a little hat,
yes,
and a pair of shorts and a light shirt. And after a little while, they're sweating and feeling okay. The whole concept really is very interesting in how complex and integrated the body is. This has to do, as you said a little bit ago, it's about metabolism, but it's also about thermoregulation. And there are many parts of the body, including the brain and the thyroid gland, the hypothalamus and the thyroid gland, and all of the tissues deep inside, the internal organs versus the skin. It's all trying to be balanced, just like we try and keep a balance of our temperature. We try and be around 98.6. We try and have a specific pH around 7.4. We try and have a specific heart rate and respiratory rate. We also want to have a certain regulation of our body temperature. And the body protects us. If we're out in the desert, just the opposite, and it's really hot, we start the sweating. So we try to cool off. So our body is always trying to protect us. So the key here is to make sure that it's within a balance. There might be people that have certain diseases, let's say someone with Alzheimer's or somebody who's on medications, psychiatric medications that may affect their thermoregulating, that they may not feel the cold as much, and they may be extremely hot in a place that's extremely cold. You have to be very careful and watch them carefully, because if temperatures get down to a certain point, you certainly have to worry about frostbite and injury to skin. I think we've discussed that in other shows. So it is a balance, but if the kids are warm enough and they're comfortable and they're not causing damage to the skin and the environment is okay, they can get uncovered. But if you're out there in a wind chill factor,
freezing.
Where freezing and it's minus 30 degrees and the kid says, I am warm, I want to take everything off, then don't let them do that. And then once you get back into normalcy, it might be a good idea to have them checked out medically to make sure they don't have a medical condition or they're on a medication that's affecting that.
Good point. Okay. Yeah, we are in Southern California, so the sun is shining brightly as it's 50 degrees outside Fahrenheit.
Yeah, and it's tough when you try and talk to a Canadian or someone else who is used to the minus 30 and we're whining.
I know. Yes. I have my siblings used to come down here when we were in our down jackets, and they would be in their shorts and T-shirts.
Right.
And we go, okay.
Right. How wrong they are.
Oh, yes.
Appropriate. So the last thing I want to talk about, I want to move on. I want to talk about something I do as a medical guide that I believe is very important. I went into becoming a medical guide from emergency medicine because I saw that people were having difficulty making medical decisions. Medicine is extremely complex right now, and it's tough to make medical decisions. And one of the things I do as a medical guide is to help people figure out the best decision for themselves. I want to talk a little bit about decision making from my point of view and give you a couple of tips on making your own medical decisions. Now, there's many opportunities to make medical decisions and health decisions. It isn't always just about medicine because you have to treat something. Sometimes, as we talked about before, you could prevent something. So there are health decisions. So there are different categories. One might be a limited concept or no opportunity to make a decision. And I saw this a lot of times in the emergency department. Somebody would show up with a fractured leg. They're out of town. They don't have their own private doctor with them and everyone else. And the leg is fractured, bleeding, and it needs to be operated on. So at that point, there aren't too many decisions that have to be made. You're in the hospital and the orthopedic surgeon is looking at you and saying, what do you want to do? Very few people are going to say, well, I don't know. I'd like to take a month to think about it. You don't have that opportunity. So there are some decisions that just have to be made instantly, and you don't have any more opportunities. Although I would always say that one of the things that's important is to try and think about making medical decisions before anything happens. And that way, when something does happen, you can be a little more prepared for it. There are some times that there's a relative situation. Somebody comes again into the emergency department. A mother comes in with her child, fever, has a cough, mild sore throat, runny nose, and the mother wants an antibiotic. And I look at the child, and it appears to me that the child has a virus. And I say to the mother, the antibiotic won't necessarily work on this virus, and the mother is insisting. So I may say to the mother, I'm going to write you a prescription for an antibiotic so that you don't have to make another doctor's appointment, incur another expense, and go from there. But I would like you not to fill it for a day or two. If your child gets a lot worse and you feel like you need to, go fill it. But if the child starts getting better, then it's better for your child, better for your child's future, because if the antibiotic really doesn't work and then the child gets sick with something else, they may not be able to use that antibiotic. So there are some times that you have relative emergencies and you need to think about things. And then you have long-term concepts that you have to make decisions about, end-of-life decisions, advanced directives, the 5 wishes. How do you want to be treated if you go into a coma during a surgery, or if you have brain damage? These are multiple different types of decisions you have to make. And we talk about other things that are just simple. You decide that you want to take an alternative medicine. You don't want to take a statin, and you want to take some other kind of a cholesterol potentially lowering medication that's in the form of an herb or something like that. So these are alternative medicine decisions that you have to make. And then there's critical short-term decisions. Like, for example, you go into the doctor's office and you get diagnosed with cancer. And then they start saying to you, while you can't hear anything else after the word cancer, they start saying radiation therapy, chemotherapy, surgery, all of these things. So all of these situations require you to make decisions. And so the thing I'm going to talk about today is to try to help on your own to make some of these decisions. And the first way to look at this is always to be informed. So the first thing I talk about is the risk-benefit ratio. And I look at it like a numerator and a denominator, and that means a fraction, right? When I say a numerator, that's the number on the top. The denominator is the one on the bottom. So if you have time to make a decision, do you want to take this drug? Do you want to have this cancer treatment? Do you want to have this surgery? Whatever. You sit down and you write as many positive reasons as you possibly can in your mind. And this can be in conjunction with family and friends and colleagues and your doctor and your nurse and anyone else. Write as many benefits as you can and put them in the numerator. And then sit down and write all the risks involved. The risk could be that if you're taking an antibiotic, it could cause something in my bowels where I get a colitis and I ruin my gut flora, things like that. There could be side effects. There could be allergic reactions. You know, when we listen to all these commercials and they tell you how good a drug is, and in the last 15 seconds, someone with the fastest voice in the world tells you if you have heart disease, kidney problems, and death. Right?
No, death is very quiet. Death.
I said wrong. And also,
and
you
then
can have
cut.
death. So all of the negative aspects, the risks, should be in the denominator, and just pile it on. Make as many as you can, and then take the number. So let's say you have 10 positive parts for the numerator, and then you have to put in the number for the denominator, and you have a certain number of negative parts. So then you divide the denominator or the lower number into the upper number, the numerator. If that number is greater than 1, that means there's more benefits than risks, and you should consider having the procedure, taking the medication, doing whatever you have to do. If the number is equal to 1, that means there's the same number of risks as benefits, then you need to think about it. You still probably want to consider doing it, because just because there's a risk doesn't mean you're going to have that problem. Not everybody that takes an antibiotic dies from it. So if it's greater than 1, go for it. If it's 1, think a little more. If it's less than 1, that means there's more risks than benefits. Then you have to think very clearly about either you need to start thinking of finding more benefits or not going for the procedure, not going for the medication, not taking the herbal treatment. Does that make sense to you right there?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Those pros and cons, man.
Yeah. So put them together in a numerator over a denominator and divide it. And go take your time, write every single thing that you could think of as a benefit for it and write that in and just count it as a number. Every single risk. And keep doing it until you have it in an appropriate manner so that you can then begin to make your decision.
Right.
So that's the risks and the benefit part of the decision making. The second part is the effect, the safetiness, or the effectiveness of it. In other words, you may take something and there may be no risks involved in it, but it may not treat it. You know?
Then why are you taking it?
Right. Exactly. So if somebody says to you, I have this thing here that I want you to take, and there are no risks in it, and the benefits are good, but then you have to ask the question, is it effective? Is it going to actually work on what I'm trying to have it work on? And if that's where you need to speak with your doctor, speak with other people, and get the idea that this procedure is actually effective for it, along with the risks and the benefits. Now, there's a thing that we do in statistics and in medicine that's kind of confusing, but it's an interesting number. It's called N as in never, N as in never, T as in Tom. So it's the NNT, and that stands for number needed to treat. Okay? Now, what you want to do and have a discussion with your doctor when you're deciding whether or not this antibiotic is good or this pill is good or this procedure is good or this radiation therapy or something is good, you would like to know from your doctor the NNT, the number needed to treat. And what that kind of means, it's a little complicated. You can Google it and look it up, and there are explanations and calculations for it, a lot of statistical things, but you're just looking from your doctor for a number. And the idea is you want to get the number needed to treat. And when I say treat, I mean effectively. I don't mean just to treat it. So it has to be effective. That means that whenever a procedure is done, for example, on somebody, it can either help them, do nothing, or harm them, right? So you need to know how many people would need to be treated that it would be effective for. So the ideal perfect one is the number 1. So if I take an antibiotic and it's going to cure my strep throat, and everybody that takes it essentially is going to have a successful treatment and it's going to be effective, the number needed to treat is 1. That's the number you want to hear from your doctor. If you hear that the number is 100, that may mean that 100 people have to have that surgery before one person is successfully treated. Got that?
Yeah.
So numerator and denominator for risks and benefits, then the effectiveness. You want to know about the effectiveness and the number needed to treat. Certainly there's cost and social aspects in making decisions. We don't really need to get into that. The other part of it I want to talk about is your own inner counsel. I always think that it's important that aside from actual statistics, you have to go with your own gut feeling. Someone that's 95 years old who has metastatic cancer and they're offering chemotherapy and radiation and surgery, and you have to look at quality of life, and they could prove to you that the cost is okay and the benefits might outweigh the risks. You also have your inner counsel. And I think it's also important to look into yourself and say, even though this might be good, do I want this for myself? So I think that's an important thing within the whole process before you make your final decision. And then you don't want to make a decision by indecision, by just waiting and waiting and waiting and not deciding, and then sometimes that can decide. So you, again, get diagnosed with cancer and you say, well, I want to take 3 or 4 years to make my decision. By that time, it might be too late. That's decision by indecision.
That's good. Yeah. Decision by indecision. I like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, I think these are very good points, Doc.
Good. So that's from a medical guide point of view. When I work with my clients, we go through all of these things. And of course, there's other possibilities. You know, if you got to a store, you went to a health food store and you decided you want to take this herb and you saw 2 of them together that were the exact same ingredients and they both had the same risks and benefits and everything else, and it didn't matter much, you could always flip a coin. And not that. But when it comes to something a little more serious, the coin flip is not the best way to do it. The numerator over the denominator for the risks and benefits, the efficacy, will it actually help me? And then the number needed to treat, all of those.
No, I think that's wonderful. I think those are very down to the point. And, you know, especially when people are caught in a situation where it's a surprise. You know, these are the 3 steps that you need to take. Quick.
Yeah. And if you can have this discussion with yourself before anything happens, so that you know that if you're in the emergency department and somebody says to you, your leg is fractured and we want to do this, and you've thought about it and you decide, okay, what are the risks? What are the benefits? Can I wait until can you do something now for me that will stabilize it so that I can get back to my doctor and my home and my family? If you've gone through that process and you have that thought process good, then you might be able to ask that question from the doctor, and they may say, well, actually we can put it in a cast right now. It'll be stable, but if you're going to be home in the next 2 days, you should get home as quickly as possible and then see your doctor. In fact, I'll call your doctor and get them ready for you. Those kind of things. Right. You can have those discussions. So I think the concept here is, aside from just learning the proper way to make decisions by being informed and going through a process, by practicing that process ahead of time when you don't really have the pressure of having to make that decision, it makes it better for you when something like that might come up in the emergency. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, well, I just had a great thought, but we're coming to the end of our show. No, I want your thought. No. I'll share the thought with you after, because that would be very cool. Anyways, Doc, do you have a health tip for us today? I do, and it partly goes to decision making. So there's a 13th century Japanese Buddhist Zen master. He was a priest, he was a writer, a poet, a philosopher. His Zen master Dogen. And he, in fact, started his own school of Zen in Japan. And he wrote a number of things, as I said, poet, writer, etc. He wrote many things, and one of them is, and please excuse my pronunciation, but the Shobogenzo. And it's basically a treasure of the true Dharma eye. That's what he calls it. And it's a series of articles and his ideas on things. And one of the things he looks at, he has this concept of we're all time beings. We exist in time, and time is a being itself. And life is made up of moments in time. And there are many of these moments in each day. And he actually has a number for it. And again, as a Zen master, he doesn't think of time in terms of seconds, days, hours, minutes, but he thinks of it in these certain moments. And there are billions of these moments. And what he says is that in every day, there are many of these moments that you can make the decision to change your will. So going along with today's talk about decisions and making decisions like that, my health tip is taking that is if you have so many of these moments that are opportunities for you to make changes in your life, use one of these moments to become healthier in body, mind, and spirit.
And what I will add to that is, don't just say it. You have to do it.
Amen.
Yes. You can say it and read about it all you want, but if you don't focus and do it, you're going to be at the same spot.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So it's a question. You have these opportunities to make changes. And when we talked about the childhood obesity and everything else, all of these things can be done. You have many, 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 many moments in each day to change something. So take advantage of at least one of them.
Absolutely. Well, there you have it, everyone. The wonderful health tip from our Dr. Glenn Woolman in the doctor's bag.
There you go. So we're closing up the doctor's bag for today. And I look forward to getting together with you and Segovia and Yoga Hub and all of our Magical Medical Tour viewers and listeners who come to us each week to find out things that can teach us about optimal health. I do want to thank all of my healers and my teachers for allowing me on my journey. And until next week, thank you, Christina and Segovia. I wish you all optimal health.
Thank you, Dr. Glenn Woolman, for another wonderful bag. Bag of goodies, bag of tricks. Love it. And of course, we'd like to thank each and every one of you for joining us in this new platform of education and information. We're grateful for your continuous support, and we look forward to hearing your feedback on how we can serve you better. You can connect with our Dr. Glenn Woolman through his website, glennwoolman.com, where we continue to encourage you to learn about his metaphor square breath. And of course, if you are watching or listening to our podcast, please share it with others and pass the link on to others that you know will benefit from our shows. We're always grateful for your feedback and comments and suggestions. Give us a call at 818-LETS-TALK. 818-LETS-TALK. Until next time, namaste.
When I was a kid, my mom used to say that whenever there was a TV show on, I would always pick the one that had the medical shows. That was always my favorite. I always levitated towards that kind of a scenario. So I almost think it was a field that chose me. And it was something that I felt more at home with. So community service is something that I've always wanted to do, and what better way than to heal your community?
Very sweet.